Today we're making a churrasco steak sandwich topped with a homemade chimichurri. Now, if none of those words made sense to you, don't worry, just grab my hand and let's get to cooking. First things first, let's make our delicious chimichurri. We're gonna need 1 bunch of curly parsley and 1 bunch of cilantro. Now, we only need half of each bunch, so I'm gonna give it a tear and throw it down on my cutting board. And try to eyeball a 1-to-1 ratio of parsley to cilantro. It literally kind of does look like a butt cheek. I just wanna go. From there, you're gonna run your knife through it and chop it until you get your desired consistency. I personally went with a finer chop, but it's still good to have a few chunks in there. Throw your chopped cilantro and parsley into a small container and now grab 1 white onion. We're only gonna need 1/4 of it, so what I'm gonna do is split it in half, cut the end off, and then peel the outside layer, and then split it in half once more. Now we want a real fine dice, so take your time and run your knife along the top of the onion. From there, you're gonna turn it over and then chop normally, taking your time with it. We really want a fine dice here, no big onion chunks. You can also run your knife through it a couple more times to dice it even further, but try not to mash it into a paste. Once diced, throw your onions into your container, and now let's get to work on what I call juicy garlic. You'll need 6 cloves of garlic, and I'm gonna cut the root off of each of them before giving them a good smashing with the side of my knife. Sprinkle some salt over them and then give it a chopping and crushing with your knife. The crushing will help break down the garlic and turn it into more of a paste. Keep chopping and smashing until you get this consistency, which looks to me like juicy garlic. Throw your garlic into the container and then grab 3 to 4 stems of oregano. Strip the leaves from the stems and then give it a fine mincing. You want around 1 tablespoon of oregano in total, and once you have it, throw it into your container. From there, you're gonna wanna grab a lemon and zest about half of its skin onto your cutting board, giving that lemon zest a light chopping before throwing it into your container and then squeezing about 1/4 of your lemon's juice into the container as well. You can see here, this is about how much I used. Next, pour in 1 teaspoon of chili flakes into your container along with a strong pinch of salt and about 15 to 20 cranks of black pepper. Pour some red wine vinegar into 1/4 of a cup and then pour that into your container. Grab a good quality olive oil and pour in half a cup of it into your container, and with a spoon, give it a solid mixing. Once it's all mixed together, you now have a delicious chimichurri that you can put on honestly anything. This chimi tastes so good, it'll make you do the Shaq shoulder shimmy. Look at that, we pretty much look exactly the same. Now we gotta do one more thing before we can cook our steaks up, which is toast our bread. I'm working with some classic Cuban bread here, and I'm gonna split it down the middle in half before grabbing a pan and melting about 1 to 2 teaspoons of butter. Once melted, throw your bread in there to absorb all that butter and then give it a light toasting until you get something that looks like this. Set your toasted bread aside and now grab the main event, your steaks. I'm working with some skirt steaks here, and I'm gonna cut the thickest pieces just slightly larger than our toasted bread. Dab them with some paper towel to collect any excess moisture, and then give them a generous sprinkling of salt and pepper on both sides. Get your pan to a ripping hot setting and then gently lay them down away from you. I should also mention that I put a very light amount of olive oil in the pan. You're gonna sear on one side for about 2.5 minutes and then give it a flip, searing on the other side for about the same amount of time. Once you've gotten a good sear on both sides, pull them from the pan and then let them rest on a wire rack for 8 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna check the internal temp, and as you can see, we're basically at the low end of rare, which shouldn't hurt anyone, but depending your tolerance on seeing a little bit of blood and meat, you might wanna cook it a little more. And after 10 minutes of letting my steaks rest, I'm gonna split them in half, and as you can see, they do look pretty rare to me at least. But now it's time to assemble our sandwich. We're gonna grab our freshly toasted bread and then lay down a piece of our steak, and I'm going to actually suggest, instead of putting whole pieces in your sandwich, you cut strips of steak against the grain. You'll see here for the second piece, I'm going to cut it in strips, and doing this makes it a lot easier to take bites out of our sandwich. But after laying down a generous amount of your steak, you're then going to throw down a couple hefty scoops of your chimichurri, trying to fully cover all of your steak with a little bit of that delicious seasoning. All that's left now is to throw your top bun on your sandwich, grab grab a knife and give it a diagonal cut and then bask in its glory. And I'll say this, it's not only a hefty meal, but it's a gosh darn delicious one as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. All the ingredients are in the description down below. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and thank you for sticking around until the very end.